Newport Beach meetup was off the charts thanks to Robert Hamilton Owens, who's on this call somewhere. He is the hostess with the mostest. He picked a perfect venue for us. We had an absolutely spectacular time, and it was great. Our next meetup is in Dallas on the 18th. Then we've got the Kentucky Derby on May 4th. And we've got Bay FC with Brandy Chastain on July 6th. Again, if you want to get in on the Kentucky Derby or the game with Brandy Chastain, definitely let me know because we've got some coordinating to do. Also, don't forget, we haven't really publicized this yet, but in September, we've got our big retreat. Our retreats are very, very unusual. So typically you go to a conference, you see great keynote speakers like Chris Tuff, but you're lucky if you get a selfie with them. So we flipped the script on the traditional retreat or conference, and you live with the legends. So we are staying at the #1 hotel in the Northeast, top 100 in the world, the Weekapaug Inn. And we are staying for 4 days with Mace Curran, who was second female to ever fly lead solo for the Thunderbirds. Robert Hamilton Owens, who is easily the most interesting man in the world. The Dos Equis guy is not even close. Joe Jacoby, Olympic gold medalist. Megan Riley from Shark Tank. And Jackie Summers, who has the #1 liqueur in the world. So we've got 5 legends for our 30 guests to stay with at literally the best place, on the planet that you could find, the Weekapaug Inn. So if you want in on that, I think we're 50% sold out, something like that. And then the rest of this month, 21st, we have Andy Reese. Andy was just named the performance and leadership coach for the Chicago Bears. He is one of our top advisors. Then we've got Anna Morgan doing a top advisor session for careers. Then we've got Robert Paler. Robert's got an unbelievable story. So he was a rugby player for Cal Berkeley. And in the national championship game, in the opening minutes, he broke his neck and became a quadriplegic. So we're going to talk to him. Then we have Alicia Abate, who's another one of our top advisors, and she is our futurist. And then on the 29th, we've got an absolute living legend, Guy Kawasaki. Guy has written 16 books. He was Steve Jobs' evangelist for Microsoft at Apple. And he's got, I think something along the lines of 3 million LinkedIn followers. So we've got Guy Kawasaki on the 29th. So not a bad March. Here's the format for anyone who's new to these. We do 30 minutes, Chris and I, fireside chat, kind of interview style, and then 30 minutes of open Q&A. So if you have a question for Chris, just drop it in the chat. Just say, I have a question. You don't have to write out your question because we want to keep Chris on his toes. So you can ask your question, anything you want to Chris. But we are really, really blessed today to have one of the coolest guys come on and talk to us. Chris Tuff is a 2-time best-selling author of The Millennial Whisperer and Savior Asks. He's a keynote speaker. He spoke for Nike, Harvard, Meta, Amazon, Verizon, Delta, Home Depot, and of course the Outlier Project. He's a documentary producer. He's been featured in the Wall Street Journal. He's been on Good Morning America. He's a very cool surfer. He's just an all-around great guy. Kathy, get us started. Mike Perlow, if you're on the call, thank you for the introduction. Tuff, what do you think?
I love it. You know what's crazy to me is how many of the legends that you showed on there I've gotten to know through various projects.
Yeah.
Like it's so, I mean, and I was just introduced to Joe DeCina. I don't even through a tortilla chip company that my friend invested in, and I'm helping him with like what an amazing group. And one thing that is like, and you have this knack, Scott, of finding just like well-intentioned people. And I think that's been one of my most frustrating things now being a speaker and an author is how many of these people say one thing and they do another and it drives me crazy. And for somehow you're able to see the good ones, right?
Well, you know what? It helps when you get recommendations. So you were Chris Schembra and I were talking, and he's like, you know Chris? And I'm like, I know who he is, but I don't know him. And those recommendations go a long, long way. So when you're getting, people from other people that you admire and trust, it's a great way to build friendships. But I'm fired up to have you here, my friend.
Yeah, dude, let's do this thing.
All right, let's start millennials. So you wrote The Millennial Whisperer. Millennials get a super bad rap. I'd love your take on deserved, not deserved, because I have my own spin on it. But let's talk about, so you wrote that, I think somebody said you had a passion disorder,
My
and
brother, yeah.
it led to two really, really great books. I think of The Millennial Whisperer really like a leadership book. Tell
Yeah.
us about that project and what the big takeaways were for your audience.
Well, and I think, so I think it's easier to look at, I was never meant to write a book, right? Although I think everyone should do the process of writing a book, right? And it's such an important, I think, exercise. If I were to challenge everyone on this call, what's the one book that you were meant to write? Like, go write it, right? I mean, it's such a beautiful process. And I've been surrounded by people that have written books, but I was like, I'm never going to write it. And it wasn't, I built my whole career building social media infrastructure, right? Like, I mean, what got me in the front page of the Wall Street Journal was what I had done around social media. I was one of the first marketers to work directly with Mark Zuckerberg as he was 2006. Like, but it was all around this place of connection. And it wasn't until I hit my rock bottom in 2016 where, I mean, transparently, I was crushing it, right? Youngest partner of a 400-person firm. I bought a bunch of the company, was flying all around the world, taking pictures with the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Evan Spiegels from Snapchat and whatever. But I hit this rock bottom where in the middle of a vacation on my third day, I checked myself into a rehab. And partly it was, I called my identical twin brother who had struggled with alcohol. And I was like, here's what's happening. I'm having these nervous breakdowns, blah, blah, blah. And I need to do something. He was like, well, the best thing to do is just follow my footsteps. I'm like, what? Right. So I end up going through this and it was 5 weeks of hell. And I took my house down to the stilts. And it was actually through that process that I finally looked in the mirror and I was like, everything that I'm about, which is connection. I'm an identical twin. I had a womb mate that I came into this world. I was meant for connection, right? And yet I'd lost that connection with my two daughters who were 4 and 6 and my wife, connection with myself and my purpose, but also connection with my 400 employees. And so as I got back from that rock bottom, I made a commitment to my wife and children. I'd be there. I'd live a connected life with them, and I'd take them to the practices, and that I'd be present. And I changed my own metric of success, connection with myself, from beating my older brothers at the game of life to just impact in a day. And then I looked at my firm that I built, largely millennials and Gen Zers. I'm like, I'm just going to put all of my effort into them and see what happens instead of flying on jets all over the place. And it was 7 months after that, Scott, that I was on an executive retreat, 14 CEOs, average age, probably about 55. And on a whim, I was like, hey, I'm Chris Tuff. Nice to meet everyone. I'd never met him before, but I don't really know what I do anymore, but I'm kind of like on a whim, the millennial whisperer. And I share my story and I sit down by the fire and these guys are like arms crossed. One guy goes, man, these millennials suck. Another guy was like, yeah, anytime I bring one of these young guys into my room, they start crying even before I open my mouth. Chris, what are some of the things that you do? And I started talking. I said, time out. Actually, I think everyone wants the same thing. And it's this authentic connection. And it's why you guys are on this retreat. But for some reason, we've all been brought up that we can't bring that to work. And here are a couple things that are true, right? And it's a product of social media, digital adoption, instant, everyone thinks instant gratification happens, but also parenting, right? You look at parenting and how I was brought up by a very British father, right? I was raised as an Xer, even though I'm on the line of millennial and X. And when I sat down at the dinner table, you fell in line. Chris, about where you think about going into school. Like it was very authoritarian. You juxtapose that to any of your young employees, 37 and younger, they're not sitting at the dinner table. They're playing beer pong out back, ripping on a vape, talking about who they just hooked up with. It's much more of this connected camaraderie. And I explained this all around the fire. And these guys are dumbfounded. And then I started talking about some of the tactics I practiced. And it was 2 weeks after that, 3 of those guys called me. They said, you got to write that book. I was like, what book? They go, The Millennial Whisperer. So I did what I did best and sprinted, wrote the book, and then the rest was, I guess, kind of history. I mean, sold over 100,000 copies. And that's really where,
which is an
I like to look at
number.
Yeah.
For anyone who doesn't know,
Yeah.
like 100,000 copies is like nuts.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting. And that was pre-pandemic and everything. It still continues to be a bestseller, even though it was pre-pandemic. I've incorporated new pieces into it, but it's amazing to me what I wrote 5 years ago is still true today. And the biggest issue that's happening, and you all experience this within your organizations, is that someone cares about me as a person. That's people's biggest complaint. And we've been so overly reliant on super expensive tactics, salaries, promotions, whatever it is, that we're trying to just accommodate for the lack of what you all do together, right? Which is this connection piece. And so I go into organizations and help there.
Why do you think organizations think that ping pong tables and foosball tables and kegerators and snacks are gonna, define a culture and make people happy? In my company, we call that cultural Febreze. It's like you just spray this shit and it just masks the odor. Why do people do that instead of kind of getting at the core of, I think there's 71 million millennials out there.
Yeah, it's soon going to be 80. And I mean, it's going to be by far the largest aspect of our workforce. And like, good luck with Gen Zers if you can't get these millennials right, Right. And so I think the answer to that question is we want simple solutions, right? And one thing that I do when I go into these organizations, it's all based on data, right? So I'm like, all right, I'm going to ask 12 questions to your employees and I'm going to deliver my keynote based on that data. But at the end, I'm going to give you 3 organizational tactics that will immediately have that ROI. And I've done this enough with big and small organizations that the 3 common tactics, it's not foosball tables. It's not, I talk about that one company I went to had a cereal bar with 3 baristas, 39 different cereals in the morning to choose from. And they're like, our culture sucks, right? I'm like, yeah, because you're throwing the money at the wrong solutions. But organizationally, here are the 3 biggest tactics. 1, allow people to make lateral moves, especially with young people. The person in your sales role may want to actually go into accounting because they find that they're slower paced and high detail, right? So let people make these lateral moves. 2, the lack of rewards and recognition. And there is a distinct line between over reward and recognition, but you need top down and peer-to-peer rewards and recognition generally. And most people aren't doing that. And then three, it's really around this thing around, I mean, and it kind of ladders up to the first one, which is spend some time on understanding how your employees are wired.
Yep.
11, and this, if you guys take nothing from this side of the conversation, 11% of employees are actually in jobs that match their personality profile, meaning 89% of people are in the wrong jobs for the wrong reasons. And the way that we've all been trained is, let's just say you have a sales team and one of your young people's underperforming. You're like, oh, well, maybe they're the wrong, they were the wrong hire, or they're the wrong culture fit, or their manager sucks, right? And it's actually none of those things. It's that that person was never meant to sell. They are largely introverted. They're slower pace, right? And so why are we not investing time and energy in like teaching our people how they're wired, getting the right people in the right seats, and then letting people flourish, right? And that to me is what's so astounding, because what I end up with, Scott, is I end up with the executive where after I'm done with my speech, they pull me aside with tears in their eyes and like, Chris, I just want a little bit of what you have.
Yeah.
I'm miserable, right? How do I get a little bit of that? I'm like, this is where the magic happens, right? And I give them my psychological survey that I use, which is Culture Index. And then we start planning that kind of what I would call reinvention to a certain extent, right? And so, you know, there's obviously lots of other tension points and a lot of things that are true for young people. They are more sensitive, right? They are more, I think, if you look at actually, I put all of the negatives, right? I think they are more entitled than before, right? They are more needy, but part of that is also meeting in the middle of these things, right? Like tenacity and resilience are the two biggest traits that young people do not have, coupled with that interpersonal muscle. Scott, when you and I were, I mean, in school, and we wanted to like even in middle school, I remember I had to pick up the phone to try to get in touch with someone. I had to get through mom and dad to try to flirt with some girl. I had a list of things that I would awkwardly talk to that girl about. And I'd take a deep breath afterwards and like, God, that was so hard. And you look at anyone 37 and younger, they got a brand new iPhone with a Snapchat account and they're right. They don't have that interpersonal muscle. So how are we actually training them to exercise that on a daily basis and to bring more of that? So we've got a lot of other tension points that I think are happening, but it's nothing but opportunity.
And I will say, for anyone who wants to bitch and moan about millennials, if you're like a dude like me, who's my age, we're the ones who raised them. So the issue is probably how we raised them and gave them participation trophies and all this other nonsense. There's so many things that you say that I think are so cool to talk about. One of them is you say be a painkiller, not a vitamin. What does that mean?
So I learned this having failed startups in the past. I'm always building side hustles, right? Even when I was at the agency, I was always building side hustles. And it was actually as I was building the software in the social media space that one of the developers said, Chris, when we're building this, we got to make sure we're being a painkiller, not a vitamin. And I was like, what does that mean? They're like, well, it's so easy to solve for all of these issues. Just solve one of them and be that painkiller to whatever that pain point is. And so like, even with these organizations, when I'm going and talking about culture, no C-suite cares about culture. They care about revenue. And so what I'm solving for isn't culture. I mean, I'm using culture as a byproduct of all these things, but what I'm going to solve for is their retention issue, right? Vanderbilt University Medical Center hired me. They had 25% attrition of their nursing staff. And they're like, we don't even know where to go. And they Googled millennial and Gen Z issue and came up with me. And I was like, all right, I'll give you 3 tactics at the end of my speech that will save you at least $100 million because you're spending $1.4 billion because you can't keep people there. And one of those solutions was just a nurse exchange, a shift exchange software. I gave them 3 options, and just people need to feel empowered to be able to schedule when they want to work, right? Because of all the stuff that's happened within flexible work. But once again, in that domain, I'm going through the pain point of what they're experiencing and how I position it versus trying to be that Swiss Army knife. And then this really relates to networking, right? So many people, as they're trying to sell whatever they're selling, they forget the importance of connection first to be able to actually gather the context, right? And to me, and I'm probably not the best solution for super short sales cycles, but for that longer sales cycle, go in with the intention of just authentic connection first. And then you're going to start getting these contexts and it's like, oh man, I'm struggling with this. And then you're like, oh dude, I got the best solution for you, right? I got this thing. We should do it. And you make it so an ask doesn't even feel like an ask. And that's really my call to action with Save Your Asks, right? Anyways, we could talk about ask holes all day long or the pitch slap.
So that was my next question. What's an ask hole?
So first of all, everyone needs to, I call it the ask continuum. And if asks come really easy to you, most likely you are an ask hole. And the best people to ask are the people around you. It's like, man, am I an ask hole? And even if you put it in the context of, on the receiving end, ask holes are those people that are like, hey, Scott, can you get me tickets to, I know you're close with Brandy Chastain. Like, can you get me tickets to that women's game coming up? And then literally 3 weeks later, it's Scott, hey, can you put me in touch with so-and-so in the group? And it's like, whoa, right? Especially as people pleasers, right? We tend to accommodate for those people. And so once you're actually attuned to this, because that other side of the spectrum of ask holes over here are the people pleasers, where I was a recovering ask hole. I went too far to the other side and I would actually let the ask pass me by, right? Because I'd feel bad or like I wasn't providing that value. And so we all have somewhere to move in that continuum. And once again, you look at this generational difference. Younger salespeople, they don't have the interpersonal muscle to develop that connection first. And so they get overly reliant on this software. And how often is it that on LinkedIn, Scott, someone connects with you, right? And you're like, oh, this seems legit, right? Maybe they want to join Outlier and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then nanoseconds later, you have in your inbox, hey, can you schedule on my Calendly? Because I got this software that can I call that the pitch slap, right? It's like, boom, pitch slap in the face. Whatever happened to the courtship, right? Like, and so we've lost this art of connection, and sales is an outcome of connection, right? Even us, right? What a great example. We were introduced. I had no agenda with you, you had none with me. I'm like, this guy vibes, like, this is cool. Absolutely, I'm going to show up, right? And then something's going to end up coming out of that. And I think we've lost all of that, which is why my title is Save Your Asks, right? We all get asks all the time, right? But we each have one ask in anyone in our network.
Yep.
Where is it that you're going to put that, right? And I truly believe that we all should be giving back. I think, and I truly believe that the connection crisis that's happening right now is because we've just gotten away from it. And so what I'm suggesting is a new way to go about it.
Why we talked to Frankie a little bit about this last week. People are so damn serious. Like, even if they're not in their personal life, all of a sudden you get them in a business setting, or you even get them on a Zoom like this, and it's like, holy Moses, like they morph into a different person. And I think it's really dangerous to turn into that super serious person and not just be, you know, embrace, like Frankie says, love your weird.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on, because I think you do a great job. Like, I remember first conversation, like we were just talking. It wasn't a serious conversation, although we were getting to know each other, and it was just fun. I just walked away saying, man, that was fun. That was a fun conversation. And we need more of that
100%.
in our world.
So this actually came out of, I don't know if you know Lydia Finette. She was the head auctioneer of Christie's, wrote The Most Powerful Woman in the Room Is You. She wrote the foreword of Save Your Asks. And as I was talking about, she's with the Untouchables all the time. And it was Lydia that was like, Chris, every week I'm at that round table dinner, right? At that auction after I do the auction, and it's the who's who. And Chris, only 5% of the people at that round table are actually memorable. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that. So 95% of people are forgettable. I said, what's it come down to? And it's not necessarily yellow glasses or having a matching Bronco or the tattoos or any of these things. That it's not that literal piece. She goes, it's the questions you are asking and the stories you are telling. The questions you are asking and the stories you are telling. And that got me to this place of, oh my gosh, I think I've figured it out, right? And so I practice this in everything that I do, which is when I'm meeting someone for the first time, or even if it's a more formal setting. I was meeting with a big global commercial real estate company. They want to partner with me and the team that I've built around culture to help bring solutions to some of their larger clients. And so they were in their suits. I was dressed like this. And I was like, guys, before we get going, we're going to play the question game. Are you ready? And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah. All right. So I got best question. You guys ready? They're like, yeah, bring it on. In not so enthusiastic way. I was like, all right, if you had 2 extra hours in your day, what would you do with them? Before we even got going and who's who and what their names were and what they did, right? And everyone thought about it. And then they started talking about, one guy wanted to learn Italian, right? Or another one had just had a baby girl and wanted to spend it but you get this context and it's like, all right, now that we got that, and then it starts actually happening more organically, right? And the stories you are telling, and I'm going to ground this into, I think, what is my most impactful story, Scott, if I can. I know we're going to be segueing into Q&A soon, but I had 10 minutes with the number 2 person at Delta Airlines, right? And so this guy, it was through a super warm introduction. 4 months after that intro, I finally got the meeting with him. And his assistant calls me 10 minutes before and said, Richard Cox can only it's not going to be in person, so you're going to have to take it from your car on a Microsoft Teams meeting, and you have 10 minutes. I'm like, oh boy. And I'm so fired up, right? And I get on there and he's just like this. He's like, how can I help you? Expecting that I was going to be some pitch slapping asshole. And I said, Richard, listen, I'm here because my only intention is that you can walk away from this meeting understanding the mission that I'm solving for. Can I tell you a story? And you can kind of see his demeanor change. He's like, kind of laugh. Yeah, sure. I go, all right. I want to tell you, I think the most important question we can ask anyone is this: what is your dream? What is your dream? When you ask a potential client, what's your dream? What fires you up, or your spouse or your child? And you get that answer. One, it creates a connection. But when you can do one thing to help them achieve that thing, that's where connections and bonds are made for life. And when I feel it, Richard, I go there. And let me bring that to life. I was in the Turks and Caicos, and I had just published Save Your Asks. And when I feel that energy, I go there. It was my 3rd day of vacation. I pulled my daughters out of school, and it was for dinner on that 3rd night that we walk into this super fancy Italian spot. And my super introverted wife turns to me as we walk in, and she's like, Chris, seriously? Because we are the only table there, and there are 13 waiters and waitresses lined up on the side wearing tuxedos, and our teenage daughters are just fighting nonstop. She's like, we gotta pull the ripcord on this. I'm like, no, let's just roll with it. We're not making another reservation, right? And we sit down at this table. When out of nowhere, Scott, the greatest waiter or waitress of my life came to our table by the name of John Lee, John-Ly, and a beaming white smile. He goes, Mr. Chris, the energy and love of this table and family is just beautiful. Our next 2.5 hours are going to be tremendous. And I look at John Lee, and the girls stopped fighting. I look at my wife, and I look at John Lee and go, hell yeah, it is. You ready to rock and roll, John Lee? He goes, absolutely. And we dive into it, which I uncover the fact that he's one of 11 kids. He had moved from Haiti 5 years prior. He played soccer. My wife was a professional soccer player. They started hitting off like that. And then towards the end of dinner, after getting to know John Lee and like hanging out, I turn to my family, I go, I'm going to go there. And my daughters, they roll their eyes because they know when I go there that I have to warn them because it embarrasses them because usually it ends up in all of us crying. And they're like, no, Dad, don't do it. And my wife's like, go for it. And John Lee returns. I go, John Lee, I'm going to ask you the most important question anyone's ever asked you. Are you ready? He goes, yes, Mr. Chris. I go, what is your dream? Here you are working 3 jobs nonstop. John Lee, what is your dream? And it can't be winning the lottery or something ridiculous like that. He goes immediately with no hesitation. He goes, Mr. Chris, I have 2 dreams. My first dream is to get back to Haiti because I haven't seen my family in 5 years. My mother is sick. I want to save enough money to buy a flight back to Haiti. And Mr. Chris, my second dream is to come to the United States and taste the Chick-fil-A. And I kind of laugh, but I get up, I grab John Lee, I give him a hug. I go, there it is, John Lee. You just put a steak down in the middle of this table. And he goes and grabs our tiramisu. And I turn to my wife and go, we're going to Latin this thing right now. Are you ready? She goes, absolutely. My daughters are like, Dad, you're so ridiculous. John Lee returns. I go, John Lee, sit down next to me. And he goes, yes, Mr. Chris. I go, we're going to buy your ticket back to Haiti right now. And I pull out my phone and we start the process. And he has to remove himself from the table, Scott, because he's so emotional. And 7 minutes later, he returns and we get his ticket back to Haiti. And the bond started there a year and a half ago. Now, John Lee and I hop on a video message on WhatsApp every single week. It was 3 weeks ago that he asked me to be the best man of his wedding. And I was also able to tell him that I'm working through the Cathy family, the owners of Chick-fil-A, to try to buy him a sponsorship to the United States and visa to work, not only taste the Chick-fil-A, but work at Chick-fil-A. And it was in tears 3 weeks ago that he turns to me and he goes, Mr. Chris. And I have my wife behind me. God gives lessons in life and he gives blessings. And you, Mr. Chris, have been a blessing. And I'm crying and he's crying. I'm like, John Lee, what's the difference between a blessing and a lesson? He goes, lessons come and go. Blessings stay with you. And you've stayed with me all the way through a year and a half later. And I thank you for that. And that's where I turn to everyone here, right? Be a blessing in people's lives, right? There doesn't necessarily have to be an ROI attached to it. And when we make that shift of mentality, that's where the beauty starts to happen.
I love it. That's
always funny. So I tell that to Delta. He goes, I'm bringing you in next week and you're going to do your speech. I'll pay you out of my own pocket. And it was so fun. And now I just got back last week. I got custom Jordan 1s in Delta colors and I delivered to him. And he was like, dude, people are still talking about your speech and whatever. But and that's what I'm all about, right? And that's why we're here today and why I have so much respect for what it is that you're catalyzing, Scott, right? Because I think the world needs this camaraderie and connection that the Outlier Project is all about.
Thank you. Thank you. We have an unbelievable group here and we have a ton of people who have questions for you. Before I get into questions, when we spoke last, Chris, I said, do you know Chuck Patterson? Because Chuck is one of the world's greatest surfers of all time. And his wife is actually on the call. So I want to say hello to Trish Patterson. Love it. Chuck, I heard, had a great birthday, Trish. He sent me a video from, I don't know, somewhere in Tahoe. So good seeing you on the call.
I just realized my video was on this full time.
What's up, Trish?
What's up, guys?
How are you?
He had a great birthday. He's on a phone call, and he's like, I'm gonna come in. I keep looking at him like,
wow. He and Tuff need to get to know each other. So Chuck is he the only guy who's ever skied a monster wave, like big waves?
Yeah, so he was pretty much the first guy. Bear with me with my speech right now. I have
you're good.
A head injury. So anyhow, but yes, he was with a couple of other guys that created it for him that were skiers, and then he wanted to prove water is water, frozen or not. And so I know
all about Chuck and his shenanigans and have seen. So I'm super close with Kelly Slater, Raymana, Colomona, and all the guys kind of out at Surf Ranch. And so I know all about Chuck, and I can't wait to hang out with you guys.
Yeah,
He's the best.
totally,
He's the
totally.
best. Trish, great,
He's
great
fun.
seeing you.
Great to
seeing
see you guys, and thank you for all your love, constant love.
You got it.
I
All
can't-
right. First question from Arizona, Sunny, you are up.
All right. Well, thanks so much. Love your story. Love the energy that you bring. And I think that is so much of life, right? Like we get out of it what we're willing to put into it. My question for you, having been someone who's been in the C-suite from a healthcare perspective, leading lots of millennials, Gen Zs, while ROI and while revenue and all of that is super important, culture is damn near as important. And I think that's how you run a really dynamic company. That being said, my question is more for like even younger. I have 12 and 15-year-old boys. They are at that stage where sometimes they're like nonverbal. They don't know even how to like just say words. They know how to type, you know. But I'm doing things I try to do things to make them uncomfortable. So for instance, my 12-year-old last night playing basketball at back, ball goes over the wall. He said, oh, well, I'm done with basketball. I said, why? Ball went over the wall. He said, no, you need to go next door and go ask for it. 30 minutes and me harassing him and like threatening to take everything away and grounding him. But it was a hill I was willing to die on because it's a life skill. You have to learn to be able to go into those situations where you feel uncomfortable. All that to say, what tips do you have for, for those even teenagers and tweens who are really challenged in society today with like interaction and social skills? What ways outside of like forcing them to be uncomfortable would you say that we could get them out of their shell and really help better socialize them?
So what's interesting about like 12, I mean, and I have 12 and 14-year-old girls, right? Which is like, it's challenging. All right. And I think the most important thing for us is to help teach them the importance of connection and exercising the tenacity and resilience muscle through experience. And there's nothing more beautiful than sports. And we got to let them find that. And so for my 14-year-old, unfortunately, it's horseback riding. And let me just take you to the moment Saturday morning when I got a Venmo request from my daughter's horse masseuse for $125. And that's just one piece of the investment that I'm making in this freaking horse. and I still don't even know what's going on, right? Like, I'm like, it looks good to me. I don't know why she's crying, right? Like, but like for her to get back on the horse as a dyslexic girl, and like, it's worth every single penny. And I need to remind myself of that. And for my other daughter, it's soccer, which is awesome. And I usually get the soccer card because I stress my daughter out at the horse stuff. But I think there's so much to be said to allow your children to choose those passions and go after them. And then it's actually through that, she's not on her phone at the horse farm, right? My daughter, I mean, and they don't even ask for them, right? And I think there's my wife, pro soccer player, also an identical twin. So I'm an identical twin, married to an identical twin. And she and her twin sister, the Augustiniak twins, were, they made it all the way to the top. And she tells both of them that you're not allowed to pick one sport until at least high school. You've got to do multiple sports because, my even the horseback rider, she used to go to volleyball twice a week. And last night we gave her the option because she's been kind of sick. Do you want to go to volleyball? She goes, yeah, I want to see some of my friends. And so it's like, I think there's so much to be said around the tenacity, resilience, but also the connect. I mean, you look at what you all do together, right? And these different excursions and things, right? Like we need to invest more in that and also stop trying to make them the next NBA prospect, right? Like let's not have our dreams be theirs, right? And instead truly let them choose. And maybe for some it's something like the robotics team, right? Whatever it is, let them solve challenges together and let them choose what they want to be passionate about. And then we need to fuel that, I think. And I don't have it figured out. Trust me. I probably got questions for you guys running with a teenage daughter. So
Appreciate it, Chris.
Kimberly Arnold in California, you're up.
Thank you. Wow, Chris, I was just in tears listening to that story, both with just all of it. So beautiful. I raised my hand early to ask a question, and then you kind of answered it, but I'll see if there's a follow-up, which was really when you're first meeting people, what is the first question or the first two questions that you use? You've obviously given us two amazing ones, but I'm curious if that's where you start or you start somewhere else.
So I go right into it. And so one of my favorite ones to ask is I go and I preface the fact that we're going to play the question game because it's way more fun. And so another one of my go-tos is 2 extra hours in the day is a good one. But describe for me your perfect day. Another one, which is one of my favorites, especially in a dinner setting where you're like, oh my God, this sucks. Like, I don't want to talk about the Red Sox anymore. I don't really care about the Red Sox and the Patriots suck, right? Like, so that was for you, Scott. But my favorite one is, all right, everyone, you wake up tomorrow morning, you can get a ticket on a flight anywhere in the world. You have 2 first-class tickets, and you can choose your seatmate and destination.
Ooh.
Now, that seatmate cannot be a family member or a friend or a significant other or a spouse. It needs to be someone that you have never met before, and they have to be alive. Who are you going to sit next to, and where are you going? And I have to caveat that it cannot be Taylor Swift. So, because so many people choose Taylor Swift. And it's interesting as you look at, all you have to do is Google great icebreakers, and then you're going to find the ones that you're most passionate about. I like to find the ones that get people like dreaming a little bit and excited. And then you use that as the segue to then get deeper, right? I can't go right into, hey, Scott, nice to meet you. What's your dream? Right? It's like, whoa there, killer, right? Like we've got to, but I think that same thing, right? We can work through the path to that authentic connection much faster than we give ourselves credit for. And what I mean by that is that, so one of my best friends, and actually he'd be a great person to bring on, his name's Mayo Sewell. And I met Mayo getting coffee 7 months ago. And all he said to me getting in line with coffee, big African-American dude with his beautiful wife. He goes, bro, he taps me on the shoulder. Bro, I like your energy. And I turned to him. I was like, bro, I like your energy. When are we hanging out? He was like, seriously? I was like, yeah. And he goes, I don't know, tomorrow. I'm like, perfect. Come to my house for lunch. And that was it. And then I uncovered the fact that this guy ended up playing in the NFL for 5 seasons, then becoming the biggest drug dealer in the Southeast, then went to federal prison 6 months later for 7 years, or 6 years later for 7 years. And it was there that he found God and found his wife. And now he started a church in Atlanta. He comes here to this studio. We hang out for 4 hours, and then the rest was history. I go, like, he'll pick me up from the airport. I'll go with him to his black barber shop to hang out for 2 hours while he gets his magician stuff done. But what happens so often is we don't see it all the way through. And then I'm going to give one last tactic, which is so amazing. And you may have heard this from someone else, but the art of the video text message, right? When we actually use video for our text messages, it's the most beautiful thing. And I'm going to put a challenge to everyone that if you look at your life, and I do these executive retreats with a guy named Bart Foster, who he has a book and a platform called Business Outside, but we do these hikes where we have them pair up, and then we do some stuff alone and people space out, and we challenge them in the next 10 minutes as you're hiking alone. Think about your life as a tree. And if your life is a tree, we end up taking a veer left on a branch versus right. There are these people that have been that catalyst for us to choose left versus right. Think about one of those moments and think about who that person is, and then what you would say to them. And then everyone comes up, and we get to the top of the mountain, and then we go, all right, take your cell phones out, you bunch of boomers, because we're going to make you feel uncomfortable. And get that selfie cam out, because you're going to send a 30-second text message to that person in a summarized version of what you just thought about. And we make them send it. And I mean, I get teary-eyed talking about this because when you go through this process, most likely you never thanked that person in the first place, and they probably thought you forgot about them, and you rekindle this amazing connection that comes to life. And I actually did my last one to my wife. I was like, I never thanked my wife. And then so I was there crying, and like, it's just like such a beautiful thing. And so the art of the video text message, I know that's a long-winded response to it, but I want to make sure that I'm also delivering some of these amazing tactics that really do change how we can more authentically connect.
And I love, so Chris practices what he preaches. He sent Kathy a video message the other day, just saying how fired up he was to come on. And of course, she sent it to me, and we're like, we love Tuff. Like, it changes the dynamic. So he actually practices what he preaches. Paul in Florida, you're up.
Oh, Scott, so great to see you. Chris, I just want to say thank you so much for your time. This has been amazing. I kind of have a question and then a thought that I'm curious on your feedback for. In terms of asking, I feel like for me, I'm definitely more of a giver than an asker. And I'm curious for you, how do you navigate that kind of harmony of knowing when to ask? And it's like, how do you figure out the navigation between giving and then asking? Because I feel like for me, sometimes I give too much and then I don't ask early enough. And I would love to know your thoughts.
So first of all, you've got to bring context into it, in that we have asking seasons of our life and we have giving seasons of our life. I'm a big believer that most of our life should be giving and reaching backwards versus forward. I truly believe that. And if someone was just laid off or something, right? It's like, all right, they're in an asking season, like go and help that person. Or if you're in that, go ahead and ask, like redeem your bank of asks. But have you ever seen Braveheart, the movie?
Yeah, with Mel Gibson.
Okay, or the scene out of Braveheart where it's Mel Gibson. I say you've got to save your asks like Braveheart, where in Mel Gibson, I don't even remember, he gives that awesome rally cry. And then everyone is behind that berm, and you've got this oncoming army that's like 3 times the size. And everyone's got this stake that they're ready to put up there. And he's saying, hold, until the last second. He goes, now. And then they take up the stake and they end up clobbering this other army. And that's the metaphor that I use for our asks. And ask for anyone, right? Especially for these longer sales cycles, is that you've got to take it to a point where it doesn't even feel like an ask, that you have that connection with that person, that it's like, oh, like, here's some of the things that you're struggling with. Like for me, it's a keynote, right? Let me come in and get your team super fired up because you're losing all your employees. Does that sound good? And they're like, hell yeah, right? So you reposition once again that ask, understanding the context that you've been able to uncover through that courtship, and then it ends up happening. But I would gather for you, you're much like me, you've got to go in with that ask a little bit sooner. And I think that's one of the other pieces that's so counterintuitive, is that 97% of people want to help people, right? And so when you mask that ask in your own mission and dream, and it's authentic to it, you're going to have almost 100% success rate, right? And so that is, I think, where the magic starts to happen. One of the things I talk about also, like in the courtship with these people, like take a walk with them. Experiences are so much better than like a dinner or even like a sports game, right? To a ticket to a game, right? Like create more of those experiences, or create a podcast, interview someone for your podcast, share this awesome 30-minute chat together. And then you're like, oh man, that was so awesome. What is it that you do? I just kind of want to work with you, right? So I would encourage those.
Yeah, it's interesting. And then the quick thought that I had is I kind of have a different approach when it comes to pitch slapping, and I'm kind of surprised more people don't. Like for me, I don't get upset when people pitch slap. I get excited because the first question that I always ask them is, how is that working for you? And I'm curious, like, why do you think people get upset instead of not turning that into opportunity? Because I feel like when people pitch slap, it's because they kind of, in a way, don't know what they're doing and they're kind of looking for direction, but people tend to let their emotions kind of take over. And I'm just kind of wondering, like, on your thoughts on that.
So I think that, especially with AI, right, and automation and software, they're making so much money with the conversion of that 1% that it's not worth their time, right? And so what I do in those situations, and maybe it's kind of obnoxious, is I send them a link to my Audible and I say, hey, I wrote a book about pitch slapping and assholes, and I think you'd actually really benefit from reading it. And it's amazing, right? Because people just don't do their research. I think AI is making it even harder to determine, but like you still can't fake this, right? And so most people just don't want to hear it, right? And I just move on to the next. And there's maybe if they hear it from enough people, they'll start changing their tactics. But I mean, it's their loss because they're just not going to be able to get in touch with you. So I say keep going, and then maybe you can help me make a quarter off my royalties with my book. Send them a link to my book.
Down. Thank you.
If you saw me squinting before, it was because Chuck Patterson had smiled and it temporarily blinded me, Chuck. So I apologize for that.
What's up, Chuck?
You guys got to go surfing someday, Chuck.
Chuck, come to. You've been to Surf Ranch, right?
Yeah, I went there with Kai for like just one little session at the beginning, but I'm not as lucky as you guys.
Oh well, or just come on one of my trips.
Would love to.
We'll figure that one out. And Kolamona is one of my closest friends. Kai's jet ski guy, Red Bull Hawaii.
That's awesome.
And Raymana. I was actually on I woke up Raymana yesterday with a FaceTime. He's like, "Brother, what's going on? I'm in Tahiti." I'm like, "Sorry, dude. I just wanted to talk to you." But I love it, dude. But yeah, I use Raymana as my intro speech about this move to authentic connection. Because Raymana, guys, here's this dude. He's 50 years old. He's probably like 5'2", probably 200. He's like this little stocky Tahitian dude who was introduced to me by this billionaire dude as the greatest connector of billionaires and A-list celebrities in the world. I'm like, what? Who is this guy, right? Like, and what he can get anyone up on Kelly Slater's wave. And it's actually through that and almost everyone, he says, "I love you, brother," after you get these epic waves. And I was like, what if we could all be a little bit more like Raymana and less like the pitch slapping assholes? And so I use Raymana as that backbone of my segue into Save Your Asks. So great to meet you, dude.
You too. Yeah, he's quite a humble individual. I fully agree with you.
He's the best.
Awesome.
All
right. We are going to try to cram a couple more questions in. So keep them tight. Tag in Connecticut, you're up.
Hey, thank you. This has been great. Chris, nice to meet you. It's already been echoed. Love your energy and your leadership. Talk about things coming full circle. I'm supposed to meet with Sonny, who asked the first question, and you just totally hit my wheelhouse. I just retired recently as a 30-year athletic director. So when you talked about all your sports and family stuff and all those life lessons things that come in there, and my next journey is I'm still focusing on these kids, these millennials and these younger kids that you're talking about because of the lack of connectedness. Like there's such a crisis there, and that's my mission now. So I was wondering, kind of want to make it a still open-ended concept for you, if it makes sense, if it sounds like a question, based upon your background in social media. So one of the areas that we focus on is how cell phone use impacts performance and how social media impacts just how you feel and what that can do in your performance as well. So you touched on it a little bit, but like you hear things about, well, in China, this is how they regulate TikTok. In the US, this is just destroying kids and people. Just wonder if you had any insights onto that as it relates to young people, especially since you have kids too. I've got 3 boys rated now from 16 to 25. I see how it impacts them. So I just leave it at that. If there's any way you want to take take that based upon that area of cell phone and social media?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think part of my rock bottom was fueled by the fact that what was meant to make the world a more connected place was actually what was tearing it apart. I mean, if you remember, Mark Zuckerberg's first purpose was to make the world a more connected place. And then you look at what it's done, and it's actually what's, I think, a big cause of this disconnection that everyone is feeling. Now, there's also some acceptance that we all need to undergo with communication has changed with our kids. And the same way that we used to hop on a call, right? That's what this has become. And like, so for my daughters, I try to regulate their social media use, but if they're on a FaceTime playing games with 3 other people, like, I'm like, that's cool, right? Like, I hear them talking and laughing, and like, I'm cool with that, right? What I'm not cool with is the mindless zombie scroll while everyone compares their insides to other people's outsides. And I do truly believe that is creating, especially in youth, a lot of this high suicide rate and some of those horrible statistics that we're seeing. And they can't regulate themselves. So it's up to us to do it, right? And so, there's lots of great technologies, Bark being, I think, a good solution for that. That's actually a local Atlanta company that also will monitor for cyberbullying and other things that we've instituted in my family. But we got to just get people outside and with each other, right? Like, I mean, with those, they're so lucky to have you as a coach, and just force them out. And then it starts happening, right? Like, and give them some of the, I think, guidance and those icebreaker type things, and things to, deliberate exercises to bring them together, and then the magic will just happen. So that's awesome. Good for you, and congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
All right, we're going to try to get a couple more questions in real quick. Yarrow in Florida, you're up.
Thank you. Hi, Scott. Always thank you. Chris, thanks for being here. This conversation fired me up. So thank you for all that you do, for sharing the John Lee story. What is your dream? Connections, relationship building, tenacity, resilience, all of it. I love it, and jazzes me up as well. My passion work is working kind of from that angle in the career development space. And I feel like millennial generation till current has, as we've discussed, kind of a bad rep in their ability to demonstrate work ethic and show up in a professional capacity. And I feel like a lot of that is that self-reflective, what's your value add, what lights your soul on fire piece, and then translating that to how they work in the world. So just curious if you had any more insight in that career development perspective in regards to the work and that you've had.
So I call it my 70-30 rule, which is 30% of your job is just going to suck, and 70% should fire you up and fuel you up. It's our job as leaders to make sure that's somewhere in place. And we've got to start adopting more openness to side hustles, right? Like, and with my team of 400 millennials and Gen Zers, every single one of them had a side hustle, right? And as long as it wasn't in direct competition with what we were doing. I went to Nike and I did a meeting with them. I said, is 70-30 in place here? And they were like, no, it's 70-30 the other way. So we allowed them, the people that were Nike kids, allowed them work on the Jordan brand. But tactically, what that looks like is take your job description on your first week of work and have them fill out what's in your 70% zone of awesomeness and what's in your 30% zone of suck. Because what happens is when they're going through 2 days of that zone of suck, they're not going to up and quit on you. Instead, they're like, oh, I just got to power through the other side. And so it's astounding to me how hard it is to teach people that concept. But when you ground it in tactics like the job description and like stop living a lie, right? Like so many people, and that's what I get, clean up on aisle age 55, which is like, you should have never been a salesperson, or you're the COO and you're low detail. Like you should, like, it's time to start making some responsible decisions to what actually makes you who you are. And that's a beautiful thing. Embrace it, right? And so I think we can be more reliant on Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, DISC profile, culture index, and focus on that to then choose people's path from it.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I want to be cognizant of Chris's time. Chris, we've got 3 more questions. Obviously, we can't get to those.
Yeah, bring it on.
Can we do one more?
Absolutely.
All right, Dr. Lisa Toppin in Charlotte, you're up.
Thank you, Chris. I'm so excited. Okay, here it is in a quick nutshell. You sort of talked about this as I joined. You were talking about the true index assessment, and you're sort of alluding
Culture.
to culture. Oh, is it a
Culture index.
Culture index.
Oh, and
Okay.
don't reach out to them. By the way, I was on a radio show with 15 million listeners, and I alluded to Culture Index. And 2 weeks later, the CEO of Culture Index said, "Chris, we don't know who you are or what you're doing. Stop talking about us because you inundated us with so many calls that our salespeople haven't been able to deal with. So please don't anyone reach out to them because I illegally have my assessment thing through a friend because they hate me because I drive too many unqualified people their way." But it's Culture Index, yes.
Got it. Okay. Well, my question really was anchoring around this idea of talent. And is really sort of what I'm hearing you allude to, that people are in the wrong jobs because they're not in position to express their talent. So you're talking about the 70-30. My question is, can we have another conversation about this when we have time to have a conversation about this?
Yeah, absolutely. And so one thing that's super important about this assessment is it's what's astounding about it is it shows how you're wired as a person and then where you are in your job. All right. So I can quickly map the disparities around these core pieces. Are you an introvert or are you an extrovert? Are you fast paced or are you slow paced? Are you high detail? Are you low detail? And then are you low autonomy or high autonomy? Then are you logic head or logic heart? Then when you marry that to how they're working in their job or what their job expectations, you can see how big the disparity is. And it's astounding to me how many people are having out-of-body experiences trying to be someone that they were never meant to be because of money or whatever it is, right? And so that's my tirade.
It's partly the fault of human resources, is my field. It's partly our fault too, because we haven't learned how to do talent assessment in a way that is scalable so we can hire in that context and to really help facilitate getting people to the right job. Somebody put right bus, wrong seat. Like we haven't figured that out.
Exactly.
But I would love to dive into that a little bit further with you, because I think that's an important piece that I'm trying to understand.
Guys, time flies when you're having fun. I apologize to those that had questions that we couldn't get to, but I know we've all got busy days. Chris Tuff, man, you brought the energy today, and I love it. Guys, buy his books, leave an Amazon review, support Chris as much as you possibly can on social media. He's doing great things, and obviously tremendous messages. Man, I appreciate you coming on and spending time with us. This was a ton of fun.
Dude, thank you guys so much. And connect with me on Instagram, Tuff22, TUFF22, or on LinkedIn. And then I've actually built a whole company in this whole culture world, getworkvibes.com, getworkvibes, because it's all about the vibe. Culture's a vibe, right? So I have some assessments and a bunch of free stuff there if you want to see this line of tactics from a leadership. I didn't even talk about the leadership stuff because it probably would have been too long-winded. We wouldn't have been able to talk about all these things. So, yeah. Anytime, Scott, dude, anytime. And man, it's I mean, seriously, what a beautiful thing what you've been able to create and see through. And I can just feel the connection and camaraderie that comes out of this. So everyone,
it's just an
be a blessing.
Group. Yeah,
be a blessing.
An unbelievable group. You got military,
awesome.
You got Olympic gold medalists, you got Harvard professors, you got a little bit of everything on these calls, and that's what makes this community so beautiful. So thanks for being a part of it, and I appreciate everybody joining today. I really do. Chris, great seeing you, brother.
Chris.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Hopefully I will see you guys tomorrow. We've got a top talk at 3:00. And then don't miss Andy Reese. I know he's fired up. He just got his full-time job with the Chicago Bears as their performance coach and leadership coach. So do not miss Andy Reese. He's fired up, and I'm a Vikings fan, so he and I are in some heated discussions right now, but I still love the guy. Scott Garber, good seeing you.
Scotty Mac, couldn't miss this one, brother.
I appreciate you you joining us. Scott Manthorn, good seeing you, my man. What's up, Alex? Victoria, always good seeing you. Cody Kern, I'm surprised you're not climbing a rock somewhere. Good seeing you. All right, guys. Chuck and Trish, you're our only couple today. I love that. Very nice. Very nice. Birthday was good. Love it. Love it. All right. Great seeing you guys. Jamie, nice seeing you. Take care, guys.